who here, just so I can read the room a little bit, who has a house that's over 100 years old? Okay, so what about, with that being said, most likely it wasn't designed originally as a wood-burning fireplace. It probably would have either been coal or gas. Sometimes you can tell that with the depth of the fireplace. If it's a real shallow box, there would have been, on a coal fireplace, it would have had a basket over front of it. So you would have gotten coal, taken a shovel of it, and thrown it in there. Which leads me to zone heating, even why so many of your homes probably have pocket doors. And I think they were way more green than we are today, trying to pretend to be green with a big, huge grape room and all that, where they just kind of use that zone heating there and get a coal, shove the coal for the evening and hunker down there. Right about right at the turn of the century, gas, got pretty popular. Gas is really clean, really easy to work with. They had like an asbestos shield on it, and I don't even know, some of you guys might even still have those in your fireplace, that little shield there. I don't know if you do, be careful with that. It's not gonna really do anything sitting in your house, but if you go to disturb it, you do wanna keep that in mind there. Wood burning kind of came, other than like the cabin pioneer life, residential and citywide, it really didn't come around till about 1930, 1940. It's when they really started building wood-burning fireplaces, and a lot of that came right after the World War II. A lot of soldiers coming back to building houses, and they're building your standard fireplaces inside these homes like that there. So that's kind of the difference of the fuel sources, but then trying to really figure out what was yours intended for, and then what do you want to do with it. So a lot of the coal fireplaces never had a clay lining system. This came around to the region of this area right about 1925, in that range there. Prior to the clay flue liner, it was just brick lined inside there. It would have been 2 layers of brick, thick, done in roughly an 8x8 square. So you could have a fireplace that's upstairs in the bedroom and one down in the living room. The one in the living room would have actually gone around, and then that square box that they bricked up, that would have then caught up with this one, and then they ran up like that. So any one chimney can hold multiple flues, but those flues should be separate. And it's not like, we have 2 fireplaces and it's just one tunnel and one tube. It doesn't work like that. They should have their own individual one there. Right around, like I said, 1925, they started using clay flue liners. I think this idea kind of came around from Europe. Most of Europe uses a round. Most of the United States uses square, and that is due to literally cutting corners and being cheap. We can fit a lot more square flue liners on a tractor trailer than you can round. But naturally, smoke and exhaust wants to rifle and spin up. So a round just naturally makes more sense, but we decided to go with rectangles and squares here in the U.S. to save some bucks. Kind of disappointing, but with that being said, whenever we say if we were to take these tiles and actually individually break them out through the chimney, we'll switch at that point and then go round. So in most times it improves the draw or the draft of the fireplace itself. So liners are not a one-size-fits-all. There's a lot of different sizes, and it has to do with the actual mouth of the fireplace opening. So it needs to be about 1/10, 1/12 of that opening there. So you can look around and you might see my fireplace is this big here, but in the next room or my neighbor's house it's totally different, and there'll be different sizes according to those liners themselves. Generally, in a home that's built from, let's just pick a year and say 1960, it's going to be a 12x12. So this is an 8x8. It's generally going to be a 12x12 terracotta clay flue liner. Now, flue liner is 2 foot tall, and they're just stacked all the way through the chimney system itself. Each joint's mortared up, and then they'll set the next one and set the next one. So whenever these fail due to water, chimney fire itself, just deterioration or decay, we'll usually remove these and put in a stainless steel liner. Now, if you don't have a liner and your house is built in 1890, then most likely we'd recommend to put a stainless steel tube inside there, and that would go from basically that top damper area all the way from that point all the way up to the top. And all the gases are contained within this, this tube system itself. Some of these are rigid and completely straight. Other ones, typically in older homes, kind of veer off because they were just handcrafted brick. It wasn't a clay liner. They can kind of sway a little bit. So sometimes we need, to have a flue liner that is adjustable and we can move around. Because you try and drop this down the chimney, you can get hung up pretty quick. And then you're trying to measure, all right, where are we hung up? And maybe now we need to come down and cut out several brick, to grab the inside of this and then pull it back over and keep it going all the way down to the fireplace itself. Most people want to assume that they want a fireplace and they want to burn wood. The reality is, it sounds like a great idea, but you can sink a lot of money in retrofitting a fireplace and never really get your money back out of it. And that could be because you didn't think it was going to be that hard to operate it. You didn't think it didn't draft the way you wanted it to, and it causes some smoke to come back into the house. Or it's just you didn't have, your brother-in-law quit cutting down trees, so now you have no fuel source, so you're kind of like bummed out about that. The chimney is not the only thing that the fireplace is contained in. So downstairs in the basement of a lot of your guys' homes, your water heater, your furnace will be tied into it as well. So it's not like, well, we don't have a fireplace, we're just going to cut the chimney off the top. That might not be the case. However, most modern HVAC companies are trying to avoid the chimney itself because their appliance down in the basement, their hot water heater, their furnace, it is causing so much moisture and condensation to travel up that it'll start to decay the chimney from the inside out. So a lot of times people think that, my chimney's falling apart and it's just due to the weather, and it's like, it's probably maybe the case, but let's take a look down in the basement. People are like, for what? And I'm like, who's hot water heater or furnace? And they're like, heck, I don't know, maybe. Go downstairs and there's the furnace or hot water heater tied right into that. A lot of times those will need lined themselves with a liner. That depends on the outlet size. Most water heaters are like a 3 or 4 inch round tube. Most furnaces are 5 or 6 inch. Sometimes you can combine those two and run them that way, but between our industry, the chimney fireplace, and the HVAC, I'm going to lean most people on an older home to just update your equipment and have it power vented out the side, rather than using an old chimney that's on its last leg and you're still pumping out hot gas all the way to the top. It condensates and gets the walls wet. That's something to consider when we look at a lot of jobs where homeowner calls and say, we need our flashing done. And I'm like, all right, so what's going on? Is it leaking? Yes, it's leaking. We've had it replaced twice and it still leaks. And I'm like, so then it's probably not the roofer's fault. It probably has nothing to do with that. We'll take a look when we get out there, but things I want you to consider would be your water heater and your furnace. And they're like, what do you mean? And it's the gases that come off of there, they just cool down and they can rot a chimney from the inside out. And you constantly think that it's rainwater, but it's not. This is kind of an ongoing thing. You'll notice like the plaster walls kind of bubbling up in like the second floor area. And it's not always most likely it's not due to the flashing of the roof system. It most likely is the exhaust that's down in the basement trying to travel 30, 40 feet to the outside atmosphere. Any questions so far? Let's move on. Yes, ma'am.
How can you tell if your furnace is tied into the chimneys? Because the minute I moved in, I was having chimney issues. And I thought that it needed to be tuck pointed and,
So you should be able to go down in the basement and you'll see if you follow, there's either going to be like PVC coming off of the furnace, and you could follow those 2 PVC pipes and they'll probably go out the foundation. If there's about this much pipe that is just connected to the stone wall or cement wall down in the basement, it most likely is tied into that chimney system itself there. If it's the last time your furnace was updated was, I'm going to say maybe 2000 from 1999 in that era, it probably is tied into.
I replaced it 2 years ago.
Okay. If you replaced your furnace 2 years ago, I would assume it's no longer tied in with the chimney. Most likely, because it causes so much water problems, the HVAC industry is pulling their hair out and they're done with this.
Okay.
And updated equipment has allowed fans and motors to be put in this, so they just shoot it out that way, versus on a chimney, it's just natural draft wind currents coming by, cooling it. So sometimes you might not have that natural, that good natural draft to it, and that's why it stays saturated there. Yes, sir.
So in the basement, I have a hot water heater, but, you know, it's tied into the chimney, but they didn't have hot water heaters in 1900, right? So did they just use the clean out to tie the hot water?
There would have been, I don't know. There could have been some sort of something that would have been venting through there. Now,
Well,
whether,
I just assumed that, well, the chimney would have had a clean out in the basement anyway, right?
not all of them, they should have, but not all of them.
Okay, I was just assuming that they used that clean out to tie the hot water heater into.
That clean out most likely would have been for like the firebox floor upstairs to like push the ashes and stuff downstairs and it falls in that clean out. So you can, instead of making a mess in your living room to clean out the ashes and whatnot, you can go down to the basement and do that.
Okay, but assuming they did use clean out in the basement, because do I have, is it a risk that you're gonna get carbon monoxide then out of those two chimneys, one on the first floor and the second floor?
It is a risk, yes, because for one, you're dealing with age and deterioration, and then those gases, are they really being contained and being exited to the outside atmosphere, or are they leaching out through the internal chimney itself? The chimney's absorbing the water content. Most likely, if it's not blocked, say if it's not blocked from nesting, from a bird or a squirrel or anything, most likely the poison gas is going to make it outside, but you're going to be left with the water content. It's going to actually soak that up there. So, a couple different style of chimney crowns. So most likely you'll have your brick up here, and then most of you guys, I would assume, probably have like a stone crown like this on top here. That can vary over the years. That could be something, you know, maybe in this shape. It could be more tapered, like that there. So we could even, if we were to reline a chimney, a lot of times we'll put a custom metal chase cover on top of it, so that pipe would run through there. And this would be your new top coming off of. So it would look a little bit more like that in that sense there. A lot of times if a chimney's not being used, you want to consider capping it off. And capping it off is kind of a broad statement, because you can cap it off with a chase cover like that, or you can actually cap it off with a chimney cap. I prefer, if your chimney's not in use, or even if it is in use, I prefer more of a chimney cap style, because it allows moisture to still exit and it's not trapped. If you run off on a chimney, and we do them all the time, we see them all over the city, it can potentially lead to problems. If you cap this off with a cookie sheet upside down, so pretend this isn't here, and it's just a metal plate, sometimes you can incur condensation in there, and you're almost left with that like cave effect, you know, so it'll just be damp inside there, and again, that accelerates the deterioration going on inside there to cause that. Most of these, most of the more modern brick chimneys will have this clay flue liner, and they can take different style chimney caps. So this here is single flue chimney cap. This would be fitted to the top of that there. There's multi-flue chimney caps, so just picture this larger. So there's different ways to actually cap off a chimney, but you do want to consider, one is there, just because you're not using your fireplace doesn't mean your chimney's not still operable from the furnace and water heater. And if it's completely not, then nothing's being used in it. What do you want to do with this chimney? So you could cap it off. You could get a stone that has no holes in it whatsoever and just put like full stone over top of it. There's a couple different options. It kind of just depends. We've dealt with some chimneys where we'll take it down just a few courses because these are all loose, and then we'll cap it off. So like in Newport here, they got a couple different rules as far as like which chimneys you can get rid of and which ones you can't. It's typically from the streets view. So if you sit on a corner, you got two chimneys over here and one in the front, you have to keep all of these. But if you have one or two in the back, you don't have to keep those. You know, so you'd have to identify which ones actually are being vented if they're being operational or anything, and then how to address, you know, taking it down and stabilizing it. And with chimneys also, you'll notice if you look in a neighborhood like they're all different heights. Like, why is mine shorter here than, my neighbor's is taller over there? It has to do with the pitch of the roof itself. So being that it's based on a natural draft system, this brick chimney has to be either 3 foot coming right out of the peak at a minimum, or if it's on the side, it has to be at least 2 foot taller than anything within 10 foot. So that's usually the roof line there. So that's why you'll see different chimneys, why does mine have 10 courses coming out of the roof and they got 30? That's what's going on there, the roof pitch itself, how that thing sits. Most of the time, what will be, what kind of breaks code is a tree now. Because if that code says that the chimney has to be 2 foot taller than anything within 10 foot, well, the builders and architects cleared that on day one, the ridge line. But now you have this, 80-year-old tree that is now growing up over the chimney, and it's hindering the draft of it. It's blocking it, and it's also blocking it from the sunlight. So it's going to hold more moisture and more water inside there. Any other questions so far?
Will a tent like that keep birds out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
'Cause
Well,
I
it's
have
not-
little bitty birds.
What it's not going to keep out, we'll get a lot of these questions, is like stink bugs and cicadas. Like if you wanted to, I wouldn't do it, but if you wanted to, you could put more screening or something around there. But this is all due to code. This is 3/4, I think 5/8 mesh is California, spark mesh, and that has to do with like wildfires there. So if you put more screening, what you're doing is you're choking it out so you can't breathe. Which wouldn't be an issue if nothing's being vented through your chimney. But if something is being vented, then yeah, it's that gauge opening is designed. It's kind of acting like a spark arrestor, so it doesn't allow the sparks to come out and fly there. Caps are made in all different shapes, sizes. You can get as decorative and as pretty as you want. I like copper. Who doesn't like copper? It's a little more expensive and it does change. Some people don't like that change always. Stainless steel is just stainless steel. It's kind of nice because most people understand that stainless steel metal is pretty much like your kitchen sink. It rarely is ever going to tarnish. There's rarely ever going to be any problems with it. If I put it on today, it's stainless steel and shiny. Most likely 11 years from now, it's going to look the exact same there. Keeping the chimney dry is pretty crucial because it's going to let moisture just soak and bleed down into a house, and it usually attacks that first bedroom or hallway that it comes through, if not the attic, if it passes through there. But some of the big issues we see with chimneys and fireplaces is it being code compliant. And today's codes are obviously more evolved than they were 120 years ago. However, I do think that they were a little more aware because they actually used a fireplace, where today it's a luxury than it is. Since the beginning of time up until about 100 years ago, it was a necessity to have a fireplace. We're probably not going to make it very long if you just had a home that didn't have an operable fireplace in it. Where now, people go to gas fireplaces, you can click them on a button, watch your movie, have your dinner, click it off, and go to bed. So they really become, it's more of you have extra money, you can spend it. We can even see it in a lot of our clients. They have X amount of dollars to spend where, it's more just they want something high-end, looks pretty, but it's completely fake. It's just a glorified lighter. That's really all it is. It'll just have a couple different flames in it. But that's just the reality of the timing that we're in. You don't need a fireplace. No one is going to be cooking by it. No one's hunkering down, and that's the only heat source for the house itself there. Any questions so far? Yes.
Does the hat hinder or help the draft?
Typically, it's not going to do anything. This is like a universal code is 8 inches here. Now, most likely on a ranch house, you can get into draft problems. On a 2- and 3-story home, though, because the longer that chimney run is, the better that's going to draw. Most ranch houses, people, fireplace just doesn't work real well. It just doesn't have much more than about 12 feet to get up and out. So for some reason, the flow of a chimney helps more when it's got a longer run there. This can be squeezed down. With that being said, if it's a longer run, or if you're sitting at the top of the hill and you've just got good wind draft, if you're down at the bottom of the cul-de-sac, you're probably not going to get a good amount of wind, or if there's a lot of trees in your neighborhood. you know, you might want that to even be taller. They make them 10 and 12 inch even. So sometimes it comes down to, pardon me, it comes down to visually what it looks like. But generally, from the base of the exit, it's going to be about 8 inches inside there. Yes.
I'm about to close on a house in this block, and the inspection report states that my furnace, it has like, when I think it's a gas starter pipe connected to the chimney flue. The chimney's cracked, and the report is stating that this is a life and health and safety hazard because there could be some fumes
Carbon monoxide.
leaking to the basement. Trying to negotiate with the partner, and she told me, well, you shouldn't fix it because what you should do is actually exhaust outside for different routes. Now that might take some time. Can I at least provisionally secure the brickwork or something so at least I don't have any kind of exhaust into the living space?
Yeah, you like
And also simultaneously, I am having water issues in the roof that we negotiated with credit for me to fix.
right.
But perhaps it's wasted money if the reason for the water penetration is a chimney, or we thought it was the flashing. So, should be like a comprehensive strategy to deal with all this whole thing at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you might want to get a full evaluation, you know, to really see what, you know, what kind of number are you talking about, $100 or $5,000, because that's going to be, when it comes to closing and all that paperwork, you don't want to be left with, you call up the HVAC company and they're like, yeah, we'll pull this out of here, we'll put you to do this, do that, and you call a roofer and they put flashing on, you're like, ooh, I'm out $5,000, I wish I would have negotiated that, you know, I didn't realize it was going to be that big of a problem. With that being said, in the chimney and fireplace industry, a lot of times we're like the deal breaker. Because we'll go in, for some odd reason, we're like the last contractors to show up, and it's like, you know, the realtor's like, I can't wait to get this fireplace, I'm gonna list it as operable. And then you go in and you do a full evaluation, and there's this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, this is a fire hazard and a safety issue. And then now it's like, great, now I can't list this house as an operable wood burning fireplace. And it's like, why did you wait to hire us in last? You know, you can see that closings next week, we need you here, and it's like,
So even
you know,
if,
I haven't even come up with a report yet, you know?
I'm gonna go ahead with mine anyway, because I want to remain married. But basically, before I go into a roof intervention, I should definitely go into the chimney first.
Yes, yeah. So that pipe, it's called a connector pipe. So that appliance sitting right here, and it's connecting right like into the foundation. So let's say this is your water heater right here. There should be a little pipe coming right off of there. You want to pull that pipe off and actually check for a draft. Most likely, if no one's pulled that off in several decades, there's going to be leaves and some sticks or something. You might find cicadas and a dead bird. You know what I mean? You scrape all that out, and then you can just take a lighter and you can light a little piece of paper and put it up to it. If it's yanking it up there, if it can pull smoke, it can pull gas up, because smoke is heavier than the gas. But if you put a lighter piece of paper and it's just blowing back in, something's not right.
So even if there are cracks, you could still be putting up.
Right. And that depends, that goes back to what you were saying about the height of a house. Even if, like on shorter houses, it's just never going to have a.
This room, I estimate each floor is like 10 feet plus the spacing, and I think I have like 25 plus
Right.
the depth of I have like 30 feet.
Right, okay. So to line something like that, it could be several $1,000s. That's why it's pointless to reline an old water heater and an old furnace. Like, take that money and sink it in and get a new appliance. You know, it's better for the home, and just abandon the chimney, you know, as far as doing something like that there. Any other questions? On the, talking a little bit about the inside of the fireplace. So you're going to have your firebox opening and then the hearth floor. That's due to like sparks shooting out inside the room, and that's why you'll see like a cement pad there, maybe a tile or even a raised hearth. A lot of times what we see down in the basement is if you go in the basement and you look up at it there's still wood there. That wood needs to be removed. You know, is that's a combustible that would really come down to like heat transfer, and it's potentially leading to that floor, you know, warming up so much that wood's so dry that it can spread and cause a fire inside a home that way, and not from an immediate flame or a spark. It'd be that wood underneath got so hot time and time and time again that it caused that drying, that charcoaling, and that pyrolysis to start now moving across the floor itself. So when I look at most older homes, we try to be honest with people on the phone. If you call and you're like, you know, I would like to have a wood burning fireplace, and my house is like 115 years old, I'm like, you know, how do you plan on recouping your money out of this? Because these projects can be anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 real quick, because it's like we're trying to figure out how to reconstruct the inner tubing, the inner venting system 20, 30 feet down, you know, to make it operable for wood burning, when the original builders and architects never really designed it for them. It was for more of a coal or a coal basket, sort of that there. But just really trying to identify sometimes can be kind of hard, because the gas changed so, or the coal and the wood almost kind of competed for each other's, you know, I mean, what was available in your neck of the woods, what was even delivered. So I think gas was a lot easier to move, you know, to have a gas line ran into your house and turn your fireplace on and get warm, versus, you know, calling a coal company and having coal delivered, and you're shoveling the fireplace, you know, and a good mess thing. You know, that's a lot of work, and that's like a memory that's set in your head there, where right around the early teens, 1905, 1910, you could walk right up that thing, turn the gas on, put a match right there, you know, you got, you know, it's heating up, and that's where that like asbestos shield, you know, would kick out some heat and stuff like that. So they were in competition, you know, and one got kind of kicked out after another, but most of those had pretty shallow fireboxes themselves there. So, any other questions? Yes.
So you would say it's like usually easier and cheaper to convert a fireplace to gas than to like restore it to wood burning, or it just depends?
Okay, that's a good question, because most fireplaces have to first abide by the codes for wood burning. So you got to get to that place first before you can do that. With gas, there's a lot of, there's other options rather than just using that open fireplace. You could do like a gas insert, and that insert might even have like 1 or 2 exhaust tubes coming off of that. Like one might be like a 3-inch air intake, and then like a 3-inch exhaust. So sometimes that's a more viable option than sinking, you know, 15 grand into redoing this whole fireplace. Let's just get an insert and have it lined, and this is like $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, and we can enjoy a fireplace that way, versus trying to bring it back to like a wood burning masonry fireplace. It can be just a major overhaul on construction, and just a lot of times when we get into it, it's a head scratcher. So you got to like recreate what the original thought was, trying to make the space just a couple more inches bigger. Man, I mean, to get a couple more inches is a huge deal on a masonry home that's already established, and you need just a few more inches for that thing to draw properly. And if you don't get that, it's not going to. Because like on wood burning, the general, like I said, general flue liners are 12 by 12, and that's based on that mouth of the fireplace opening. What if you cheat and take the easy way and you break these tiles out and you're like, I'll just drop, you know, 10-inch down inside there, a 9-inch, so it's easy on me, I'll get it down there, we'll have an easy day. That might not be able to take the volume of smoke being created downstairs, so now it's just a back puffing coming into the room, and they're like, hey, I thought you were gonna make my fireplace work, turns out it's actually worse, you know? So sizing it up properly, and that's what I'm saying, to get a couple more inches on all 4 sides can be really tough. So then you start thinking, what are my other options? Maybe I just want to do a gas insert. It's not what my heart desired, it's not what I was really going for, but I can still, you know, go in and work that route there.
I have a question about that. If you do have a gas insert, the chimney still has to work, right? Or
So that's interesting to say. There's 2 kinds of gas inserts. There's like co-lineal liners and there's coaxial. And one of them, the systems go all the way up, and the other one goes out the side. Now, when it goes like right out the side, for whatever reason, it's allowed to just go that way because there's like a motor inside here that pushes it out. I think those units are typically a little more expensive than the lining system that runs all the way through the chimney, and that works a little bit easier on the machine itself and the appliance itself, because it can still work off a natural draft. But it kind of depends, that might not always be a viable option, so the industry recognized, you know, if we're talking an old chimney that's unstable, we're not gonna run a 30-foot of liner through it.
Which is what I have.
Right, if we can take this pipe and run it right out the side, you know, like if the unit's over here, and we connect that to that, you know, then we can shoot it right out the side. That's an option too. I know a lot of companies, for one reason or another, don't like doing that because I don't know if there's like a malfunction sometimes, occasionally, but that is still an option to do that there. The preferred method is to run and use the existing flue system that was designed for that chimney itself there. So the other thing with gas, so there's vented and vent-free. I am not a huge fan of vent-free. I'm not anti, but the problem with vent-free, most vent-free systems you can almost taste like the gas being burned. There's really like, I don't know how you can say something's free of gas when you're burning gas there. It doesn't always, logically, it doesn't make much sense to me. I'm pretty sure that in the state of California and the state of New York, they're actually like outlawed for sale. And those two are usually the front runners for what happens across the country. So whether it's coming here next year or 15 more years from now, vent-free is not the best option. It is an option though, but I feel like it's, because you can never exhaust it, that you're gonna be left with a taste and smell and a moisture content that's still left in the home. And especially on like taller ceilings and stuff, it's just gonna kind of reside, you know, there. And a lot of times, the vent-free logs can be vent-free, but that doesn't mean those vent-free logs are being put into a vent-free fireplace. So then you kind of get into that gray area of, is this okay, is this not okay to use? And it's like, as you know, as a chimney professional, I'm like, that's probably not okay, but let's look at what the manufacturer of those logs say. So ultimately, they design the logs, so they can tell us what type of system it can be put into, but it gets to be a gray area, because people, a lot of times, that's just, oh, let's just put in vent-free logs, and it's like, you can do that, but that doesn't mean you put yourself in a safe, viable situation for your living room or your you know, fireplace. And even like bedrooms, there's different codes on the bedroom gas fireplace, because if you fall asleep, you're just breathing that carbon dioxide. So I mean, there's specific units that in logs that you can actually only use for a bedroom fireplace. That there. Any questions? The fireplace could definitely be a good sales tool for realtors, provided it's operable. You know, because a lot of people want to see and buy a home where, you know, it says, you know, we have an operable fireplace. And for some reason, there's just a confidence instilled, you know, that says, hey, if it all hits the fan, we could at least burn this fireplace, you know, I mean, for the next couple of nights and whatnot. I think there was an issue a year or two ago in Texas where all their power was out for several days, and they started freaking out. You started thinking, how am I stuck like this? Am I dependent on the government, or for somebody to come help, or hey, it's all right, we'll act old school. We'll just use the fireplace, we'll all hunker down here, and we'll warm up some water, you know, if need be there. So there's always the plus side of a fireplace, but then when you start talking thousands of dollars, how are you going to reclaim or recoup that money? You know, and then you really got to decide. I'll sit with a lot of people sometimes and really try and let's figure out who you are. You say you want a fireplace, but do you have a source of wood? You know, for one, are you living in the city? You know, you probably don't have a whole lot of room for a stack of wood out back, you know, for your fireplace. The other thought is, how do you transfer that into the home? You know, if you have a fireplace down in the basement, but you have no passenger door out of the basement, are you really willing to get the wood, bring it through the house, and walk it down to the basement? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe that sounds reasonable for year one, but after about year 4, you're done carrying wood downstairs. You know, so then you start thinking, well, then what do I like? We want a fireplace for maybe a couple dinners throughout the years, Christmas, maybe a couple football games, you know, something, we might use it a dozen, maybe 2 dozen times. Then gas is probably your better option, if that's what you know, if that's what you're gonna do. But you can spend thousands of dollars on a fireplace system, and you really gotta think, are you okay with that? Fine with not really returning and seeing the money invested into that, you know, so it can, you almost gotta really decipher what's right for you and your family. If you were gonna have a fireplace that you weren't no longer, it's no longer operable, and it's just this ugly fireplace, what do I do with it? You know, there's a couple different cheaper thoughts on it. You could paint the firebox black. You could put a series of candles at different heights and just use it as like a pretty candle rack. The other thought would be you could get like just a nice grate and some birch logs, you know, and just keep it in there just as a visual decoration, you know, something in that sense there. Because what do you do with that black ugly box that's not really going to be used? How do you pretty it up and still appreciate what's going on there? So there was someone in the other class that mentioned about bricking up the fireplace, and you can do that too. And if you're not going to use it, there's a couple different options. But besides putting the couch in front of it, you know, what are you going to do to kind of like block it? So I think you showed me that picture. It seems like you got a really pretty fireplace. Even if you can't use it, how do you still visually look by and like, wow, that looks really pretty, you know? I don't know who does that. I'm sure somebody in the city addresses that, can bring that thing to life, whether it's like wax on the car or something like that. There's probably something that can highlight and bring that, you know, back. She's got some really pretty artistic work on the fireplace. So obviously something like that, that's in your living room, you want to appreciate it, you know. So just thinking of what you can do with a fireplace that was designed and built 130 years ago, what can you really do with it today without sinking thousands and thousands of dollars into it and still just appreciate it? So like, yes.
How long can a fireplace go unused before it becomes an office?
Clarify, what do you mean?
Well, like we recently rented a place in Orlando, so I don't think the last couple that I lived here ever used this fireplace. So I don't know if it's operable or not.
Okay. With that being said, I would want to hire a chimney company ourselves or somebody else to come in and give you an evaluation of it. At least that way you can benchmark it and know what's going on with it. We use cameras in most of our chimneys. So I'll show up to the house, throw some tarps down at the fireplace, turn the vacuum on, run some brushes up through it. There's a couple different ways you can brush a chimney. This is kind of the old school method, Mary Poppins way. But there's you can put these on spinner like a drill and actually have it spun through, so it's a lot more effective. They even got brushes now. We've got weed whackers. You know, where there's just some like the licorice brushes, and they'll go in and whip it all. And then we'll run our video camera up inside there and actually see what's going on with it. And that video camera helps because you can kind of see if there's any internal cracks or voids or just areas that does something does it, what's going on back behind there. So at least you could, if you knew what it was, you can benchmark it, and then you can make a decision on how safe you think this is. Ultimately, when I show up to someone's house, you know, and if I'm done sweeping and give it the clean bill of health, and they're like, "So I'm safe," and I'm like, "I didn't say that." You know what I mean? Because I have no idea if you're going to shove the Christmas tree inside there. You know what I mean? So, and is it really safe to have a fire in your living room? That would be a real liability on my end to sit there and say you're safe. It's only safe as how well you're going to properly use it. Or you use good, dry, seasoned wood. You meet all your clearances to combustibles, you know, from the bottom all the way to the top there. You know, so creosote buildup is actually a fuel. So if those sparks fly up inside there, you can have a chimney fire at night, you know, a portion of that wall inside there, if not the whole tube system itself. So having it swept is crucial, so you don't have, you know, like, remember those little snakes on the 4th of July, you light them and they expand? That is creosote at its finest right there. It's this small, once it catches fire, it expands. So you figure if you've got a whole chimney system, you know, this big all the way through filled with creosote, and you're like, I don't even know what's going up in there. I'm gonna have a fire, and that actually lights. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have a rip-roaring fire, a tube of fire shooting out onto your roof. You know, so that's what it is important to have have a chimney sweep come in and evaluate it unless you at least know what's going on. And you can ultimately determine the safety of it, but I'm not gonna I'm not the chimney police when I go into somebody's house. Like, I'm not like, you don't meet this code, and this code, I'm shutting it down. I'm just saying, you don't meet this code, and this code, and I recommend you don't use it in its current state. You can take my invoice and use that as your kindling and start it up. Like, I'm not the chimney police. I wanna make sure we're talking about the integrity of the home and you're fine. I'd like to keep you guys safe, but some people they're just gonna be stubborn and they're set in their ways and they're, me and my dad, we had a fire for years, nothing, but that's fine. That's, you know what I mean? Do what you want. But having somebody come and inspect it, you can at least benchmark what's going on, and see what it is what you want to do with it. If you want to just call time out and say, we'll just sit for a few years and we'll address this later, or hey, this is what we really want. Let's just tackle this now, this year. But it's the best way to benchmark and really see where you're at.
So would you recommend like a yearly clean before getting started for
So
fireplace?
NFPA 211, they are basically the fire marshal code. They're really associated with most firefighters and everything. They'll set the standards and codes. What they recommend is that an annual inspection of the fireplace be done. Upon that inspection, if it needs swept, then from that point, sweep it out and remove the ignitable creosote from that point there. The reason they say annual inspections is because there's different users in a home. This lady and husband might use it, and then they had a family party, and her brother-in-law came over, and he was drunk, and he was just throwing wood in there. It could be, different users in that sense, or her son, they left for vacation for 2 weeks, and her son used it. There could have been a lightning strike throughout the year, there could have been an earthquake, there could have been a foundational shift. That's why they're saying annually, this thing needs to be inspected at a minimum, just to see what's going on with it, and then from that point determine how much creosote, did you have 4 fires last year, did you have 40? 40, you need to have it swept out 4. There's probably not going to be any much more than like black soot, so there would be nothing to sweep out from that point there. So yeah, annual inspection is important, but if you don't plan on using it, then it doesn't really going to make any difference in that sense there. Yes, sir.
Gas, the gas chimney, 1900s. There's no reason to believe that those flues will still be good, right? Okay.
They're just, most likely the age has just caused them to deteriorate. And each fuel source is corrosive in itself. So oil is going to be very corrosive. Coal is going to be very corrosive. Gas, not so bad. Wood burning, the creosote there will be pretty corrosive in itself. So on like a lot of coal fireplaces, let's say you had a coal fireplace and you wanted to use it as a wood burning, there's actually a special 316 pipe you have to use, because not only are you dealing with the exhaust that you're using currently for it, but if you shove this pipe down an old coal system, that coal is still left inside there, and that will attack the pipe from the outside. So it's not like the gas and stuff you're having going on today, it's the old stuff that was left over inside there is now attacking the pipe there. But it would never be safe to assume that, this is fine. That's not something that I would ever encourage anyone.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if it even made sense to get an inspection. It would have to be lined and done, right?
Right. Okay. Right. And like I said, these clay liners didn't come to the U.S. till right about 1920. 1925 is like the easiest mark there, but that's not to say that one neighborhood in that builder was hip to them in 1922, and he's been using them since 1922, and this builder just hit the market, and it's 1928, now he's like, yeah, let's use, clay flue liner. So 1925 was roughly the era when the clay flue liners really started predominantly being put inside the chimney system. So you'll see a lot of the older ones, and maybe you guys in some of your houses will have that clay, that real pretty clay capital on top there. That was the additional 2 foot taller than anything within 10 foot. You build that chimney up and then stick that on there. And it was kind of like a crown jewel, that you put on the very top, They're actually still pretty valuable. even to buy an old one is like $100. You know, more people realize just nowadays, like, quit throwing history away. You know, like, tell your roofer not to just grab that thing and pitch it down off the roof. You know, like, at least try and salvage it one way or the other. We have a couple in our yard that I set plants in them, put some lights in them. I mean, they'd make even just for cool, you know, yard art if you were just even save those capitals themselves. But when you see that capital, that's pretty much the only clay tile that would be in that style. From beyond that real pretty clay capital, there won't be clay liners inside there. That would have just been an old school way to really decorate, bring it up like that. Any other questions? I think they wanted me to finish up just a little bit early for the next class. Anything chimneys or fireplaces related? I got some cards downstairs. If anybody wants to grab any, feel free to give us a call or reach out if you have any questions or anything. We can coach you through or walk you through something. A lot of times we'll deal with realtors and they'll kind of just, hey, what's a ballpark for this or that? No problem. Just reaching out, you know, it might be $6,000 to $8,000 in that range or something. At least you can kind of get an idea of, you know, where you're at and how much money you're going to put in the budget for something like that. Again, this still leads me back to where chimneys today are more of a luxury. You know, the fireplace is. The chimney stands outside of the rooftop. We want to make sure that's watertight and not just leaking water into your home, causing damage to your walls and surrounding walls and wood framing, things of that nature. So your top components are going to be chimney crown, chimney cap, brick structure itself, and then the flashing around it. You know, from that point there, keeping that watertight on a usable or unusable chimney is pretty important in either sense there. All right, well, we'll let 10 till 3 now. They wanted us to finish up just a little bit early so they can get cleaned up here and let the next class come in. Thank you all for coming. It's really nice to see your faces. Last year we were down in a little basement with the camera crew here and everything. I was a little uncomfortable, so it's nice to see some faces again. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.